FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
As opposed to being an emissions cap, it is a supply cap. Carbon is not going to get into the atmosphere if it doesn't come into our economy in the form of coal, oil, or natural gas. So if we can crank down that supply of carbon, then it's not going to get into the atmosphere. If it doesn't come in, it can't go out. So this, it seems to me, if we don't want to do rationing, and I don't think we should, the only way that we can guarantee that we're going to crank down carbon emissions steadily, progressively, aiming perhaps initially for 80% reductions, but being prepared to go all the way to 100 as we get more sure about the science. The only way to do that is with a supply cap. So that's, I think, has to be at the heart of any climate solution. Now, how would a supply cap work? It's fairly simple. And that is a key virtue, as I said earlier, simplicity. Any company that first sells fossil fuels within the US, and there are a relatively small number of those companies, a few hundred of them, Exxon, Shell, you know the names, they have to buy a permit for each ton of carbon that is in the fuel that they sell. So that's what they have to do. They all know, they all report to government agencies how much fuel they sell. So this is not a big problem to determine how much fuel they're selling and the carbon content. Each year, the government reduces the number of permits, so many percent down. Every year it's 4, 5, 6% lower than the year before. So that reduces the amount of carbon fuel that's coming in that ultimately can be burned. And then all these companies true up at the end of a year, kind of like you do when you file your income tax. Okay, this is how many tons of carbon we brought in this year. This is how many permits we have. If you don't have enough, you pay a stiff penalty. So there's an incentive to conform. Now this system has many advantages. It's simple. You don't have to monitor emissions all over the place. It covers all parts of the economy. It's simple to administer. If you sell the permits, as we should, not give them away, which has sometimes been proposed, you raise revenue, which is an important thing, which we'll come back to. And the other key point is that with this system, and the valve, I should say, that is in the graphic there is a key part of it. You've got a valve that we turn and we crank down. We could crank it down all the way to 0 if we need to, and that is really important. So a supply cap is transformative, it's simple, and the question is, one question is, can it be adaptive? And that depends on who controls that valve. Now, if Congress is controlling the valve, in other words, if you want to tighten the valve, you have to pass some new law. That's not going to work. President might be a little able to respond more quickly, but presidents are politicians too. And the ideal entity to control this valve, in my opinion, is some independent entity that is not politically driven, that doesn't need to campaign for re-election, that doesn't need to raise money from big corporations, that doesn't need to appeal to voters who don't want to see gas prices go up to $10 a gallon. So you need an independent board, sort of like the Federal Reserve, which can raise interest rates, and they don't have to run for re-election. So that's the reason that we've wisely delegated the power to control the cost of money to an independent board. Well, carbon is kind of like money in our economy. It's pervasive, it drives the prices of many, many other things, and politicians are very hesitant to touch those prices. So you need an independent board to control that valve. And this board should be driven by science, not politics, not even economics, but science. So an independent carbon Fed, that's what I call it. You could call it a sky trust, but it's an independent board that responds to the state of the planet as we know it.